This is a discussion of how translation works in geometry versus how you'll see it work in algebra class. In geometry class, we talk about translation with regard to maybe a particular point. So we might have a point like x comma y, and we might describe the translation as something like this: x plus 3 comma y. And what that would indicate to us is this. Let's say we had a point like 0 comma 0. We would then say, let's say that's our point P. If we wanted to talk about the P prime, or the image of this point being translated, we'd say, well, x plus 3, so 0 plus 3, and then y is just y, so we would just say move 3 to the right, essentially. So this guy here would be P prime, this guy over here is P, and that's how we would describe the translation. It's really very straightforward in geometry. If we add 3 to an x-coordinate, we're going to move 3 to the right. The same thing is true with the y-coordinate. If we added 3 to this y, if we added to this y-coordinate 3, if we said y plus 3, we would move up 3. Well, there's something that is a little bit different when you get into algebra class, and it's not urgent that you know it right now, but as long as we're talking about transformation, I just want to give you guys a heads up. We're going to look at the graph of a parabola in algebra class. In algebra, this would be the graph of a parabola, and we could take a table and fill it up with values of x and y, and depending on what the value of h and k are, this parabola would be in different places in the coordinate plane. So it turns out that the k moves the parabola up and down, and the h moves the parabola to the right and left. And the easiest way for me to show this to you is with this fancy graphing software known as Desmos. Desmos.com. It's free. It's a free website, and it's worth investigating. So first of all, I'm going to show you that Desmos shows us exactly what we expected when it comes to points. If we have a point like a comma b, and I'll make a and b into sliders so we can change those values, and then we look at a point a plus 3 comma b, we'll see that, let's go ahead and make the second one a very different color. So our first point is blue, our second point is red, so a comma b is here, and a plus 3 comma b is over here. I'm going to go ahead and change those a values to 0 and the b values to 0 also. So our a comma b is at 0 comma 0, and our a plus 3 comma b is over to the right 1, 2, 3. And so by adding 3 to the x coordinate, we get exactly what we expect. We get this image, this red dot, this image 3 to the right of the original point. Now let's take a look and see what happens if we do things in algebra class. We say y equals parentheses x minus h parentheses squared, and then we go ahead and we add k, and we'll make sliders for h and k. And what we see is a parabola, and I'm going to make h into 0, and I'm going to make k into 0 also, and you'll see that the vertex of the parabola is right at 0 comma 0, just like our point a comma b that we had up here. So the question is, what happens if this h value gets bigger? Because over here, when we did a plus 3, our graph moved to the right. And in fact, just for fun, I'm going to change this to x plus h instead of x minus h. So we would expect that if I added some h value, like 1 or 2 or 3, we'd expect this parabola to go to the right, if we understood our geometry very well. Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and change h into a positive 1. And you'll notice that it's not going to the right. And I'll change it into a positive 2 and then a positive 3. And you can see that the graph of the parabola moved to the left and not to the right. That is the reason why I am making this video for you, is to give you a heads up that simply memorizing facts in math class is not nearly as good as taking the time to play around with the math and figure out what really works. Now, in the case of this equation, as long as I'm here and I've got Desmos, let's take a look and see what happens with the y value. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that h value back to 0. And oh, you know what? Let me show you the minus first. So let's go ahead and make this x minus h. And then I'll go ahead and make it h. I'll make h a positive 1. And I'll make h a positive 2. And I'll make h a positive 3. And what you can see is in this equation, in this function, we actually get the parabola moving to the right as we subtract values from x, not as we add them. But let's take a look at the y value. With the y value, we do plus k. So I'm going to go ahead and do plus 1, plus 2, and plus 3. And what you can see is the parabola moves up. And if I do the same thing, I'm going to do plus c over here and add another slider for our image point. And what you can see is that if I add to the b point, if I add 1, 2, 3 to the b point, it goes up just like we would expect. And interestingly, in algebra class, if we add on to this guy, if we change this k value and make it plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, the y value goes up just like we would expect. Now, why is it that the y value works exactly the way we'd expect it and the x value does not? Well, it's because we are directly adding this y value. We're saying plus 1, plus 2, plus 3 to this other stuff, and all of that equals y. So whatever we add here is making y bigger. Now, to see why the equation affects x in the opposite way, we'd have to rearrange the equation and get x all by itself. Now, I have to admit, I've already taken up more time than I really wanted to in explaining this concept to you, but I will show you, for those of you that are curious, what happens with the equation. Now, this part is not mandatory to watch, so this is just if you're curious what's happening here. So let's go ahead and try to get x all by itself. I'm going to do y minus k, so we subtract k from both sides. And then we will do the square root of both sides. So let's go ahead and do square root. And when we do that, we end up with simply square root of y minus k equals x minus h. We no longer have this square. If we square root a square, we just get x minus h. I'm going to go ahead and move x to the other side. So it'll be x minus h equals square root of y minus k, and then we'll go ahead and just add h to both sides, and when we do, we get x equals square root of y minus k plus h. So if we take the very same function, the very same equation, and we get x all by itself, this x minus h turns the h into a positive. So so now we can see that if we put in a 1 here or a 2 here or a 3 in for h, where it says x minus h, we're really adding those values onto x. Now, if you don't get that, that's okay. This is simply meant to be an introduction, and really the best way to get stuff like this is to struggle through it yourself, or come and ask me questions. In the meantime, it's not mandatory that you know it. This is merely FYI, for your information.